All right, 2 Kings 25. This is another one of those chapters that changes all of history. So, very definitive things we have here. This is a chapter when Nebuchadnezzar is going to realize that all the cahoots, secret planning between Israel or between Judah, really, and Egypt, he's going to realize they're betraying him. They're going to revolt against him. And he decides, I'm not having any of this baloney. We're wiping them out completely. This is what Jeremiah prophesied. This is what Lehi prophesied. All the prophets prophesied Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. Isaiah prophesied this. All the prophets prophesied this, basically, from this whole generation of prophets. This is the chapter where it all comes together. Okay. Now, this is important because when we look at our timeline, okay, last chapter, we had the break off for the Book of Mormon, starting that chapter. This is 11 years after. There's 11-year difference between 24 and 25. Okay. So this is important. Zedekiah's reign started in 24. It's now ending in 25. Okay. 11 years difference. So by this time, Lehi and his family have sailed. They have made it to the promised land. They have settled it. They have split up. They've done their things. The Lamanites, Nephites are dividing out, going their own ways. That's where they're at. So the Book of Mormon's going that way, and we'll go into all those stories when we get to going through the Book of Mormon. But just so you know, timeline-wise, that's what's happening. This is the major moment of history, okay? Babylon destroys Jerusalem. This is also, if you remember, we've talked about from the time of Solomon building the permanent temple to this chapter is known as the First Temple period, okay? This is the First Temple period, and then there's a Second Temple period, which is going to come in the future. So there's a bit of a gap between those two, chronologically at least. So, but that gap is usually associated with Second Temple period for the most part. So verse 1, it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, pitched against it. They built forts against it round about. So there, verse 2, the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So it was besieged for a little while. It wasn't just walk down, annihilate. There was besieged, and then it came to this 11th year of King Zedekiah when everything falls apart. Verse 3, on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine prevailed in the city, and there was no bread for the people of the land. The city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between two walls, which is by the king's garden. Now the Chaldees were against the city round about, and the king went the way toward the plain. So people are fleeing Jerusalem. They're being besieged, which is the traditional Assyrian way of doing things, is you basically build a wall around them, you cut off their food supplies, you get rid of their gardens, get rid of the lands, destroy the agriculture around the city, poison the water, everything else, so the city becomes weak and falls apart. They're starving. They're starving inside this city, basically, and they're fleeing. The mighty men are getting out of there because they know they're not going to last. Verse 5, the army of the Chaldees pursued after the king, Zedekiah, and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army were scattered from him. So they took the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon, to Riblah, and they gave judgment upon him. So this is Zedekiah. He fled. He left the city of Jerusalem, basically during the siege of Jerusalem, where they're waiting. Then the people are dying. They're starving to death. Then the armies can come in and just annihilate them, basically. And now that they're worn down, annihilate the city. Zedekiah tries to flee. He tries to escape. He escapes. He gets caught by the Chaldees, who come bring him to Nebuchadnezzar, and they are going to pass judgment on him. So verse 7, they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. So they tied Zedekiah down. They captured him. They forced him to watch every member of his family being killed. They murdered his family in front of him, killed his whole family, which is sad by itself. But you have to realize this means, the implication is, no more kings. no more of his line going forward, no more descendants. And back then, that was a horrible thing. Basically, your line ended, which means no legacy. No one will remember you because you don't have anybody to carry on your names and your family and things. They did all of this. And then after they did this, they gouged his eyes out. And then they basically made him walk to Babylon. They put a rope around his neck and they made him walk behind a cart, and they made him walk from this area, from Israel and those areas, all the way over to Babylon. So he had to go from Jerusalem and that area all the way over to eastern Iran, into present-day eastern Iran, basically. So that's what happened. Now, verse 8, in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem. And so this is, just to give you some ideas here, you remember they talked about the 9th day of the 4th month of that reign. So this is the 9th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign that they started the city siege. And then we jump up here into the 19th year of the king's reign. So they've besieged the city, they've destroyed it, and it is going to fall. It wasn't once, like all at once kind of a thing. It was over this time where they were just worn down and then destroyed, basically. So he says in verse 9, he burnt the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. Now, this wasn't necessarily years and years and years and years and years of destruction. This was really short period of time, but months and months and months of this, basically. Verse 10, all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard break down the walls of Jerusalem round about. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away. But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. And the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases of the brazen sea that was in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldees break in pieces, and carried the brass of them to Babylon. And the pots and the shovels, and the snuffers and the spoons, and all the vessels of brass wherein they ministered, took they away. The fire pans, the bowls, such things as were of gold in gold, and of silver in silver, the captain of the guard took away. The 2 pillars, 1 sea, the bases which Solomon had made for the house of the Lord, the brass of all these vessels was without weight. The height of 1 pillar was 18 cubits. The chapiter upon it was brass. The height of the chapiter 3 cubits. The wreathen work, the pomegranates upon the chapiter round about, all the brass, like unto these, had the 2nd pillar with wreathen work. The captain of the guard took Seraiah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the 2nd priest, and the 3 keepers of the door. So they basically destroyed this. They took anything that was gold and silver, anything precious, they marched it to Babylon. They didn't just take the big important things. They were breaking the buildings down so they could pull the gold and silver off of them. They were destroying things, pulling buildings down to take all the gold and silver and values out. They destroyed the wall around the city of Jerusalem. Now that means 2 things. One is now they're defenseless. Any army can come in on them. There's no protection. And any animals, wild animals, could come in to feed and to kill and to attack, because they couldn't keep them out either. Anybody could just walk in because they had no protection. So all their defenses were destroyed as well. Verse 19, out of the city he took an officer that was set over the men of war, and 5 men of them that were in the king's presence, which were found in the city, and the principal scribe of the host, which mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land that were found in the city. And Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took these and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them and slew them at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away out of their land. So everything was gone. The poor were left. People who had nothing were left. They were overlooked, but everything else was taken. All the armies, the mighty men, the priests, everything gone, basically. Verse 22, and as for the people that remained in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had left, even over them he made Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, ruler. Remember, Shaphan was the one that read the words to Josiah. He was the scribe that helped Josiah learn the word of God. And so his son, his grandson, is becoming the ruler over whatever was left. He's kind of like the provincial mayor that Babylon was putting in place. Verse 23, when all the captains of the armies, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah governor, there it came to Gedaliah to Mizpah, even Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, and Johanan the son of Kareah, and Sariah the son of Tananhumeth, and the Netophathite, Jazaniah the son of Machakite, they and all their men. And Gedaliah sware to them and to their men, and said to them, fear not to be the servants of the Chaldees, dwell in the land, serve the king of Babylon, and it shall be well with you. I mean, what else are you going to say? You just got your butts handed to you by Babylon. And so the Chaldees is kind of a part of Babylon, another group out of Iran, basically. They're pulling all this together. I mean, utter destruction. This is the most destruction Jerusalem has ever seen in its history. Just utter destruction. The temple has been broken down and is you can't use it anymore. It's gone. Anything gold and silver is gone. The agricultural lands have been ruined. There's no wall around Jerusalem. Only the poor are left to basically fend for themselves. And so they put this guy down there to be a ruler, kind of a provincial mayor over them. And he's like, we need to play nice. We're going to have to suffer through this. Basically, we're not going to overthrow anybody. Play nice with these new overlords we've got. So verse 25, but it came to pass in the 7th month, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, son of Elishama, of the seed royal came, and 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah, that he died, and the Jews and the Chaldees that were with him at Mizpah. So this guy is like, nope, we're not going to follow this. We're going to go. So he killed him and tried to go after the Chaldees. And in verse 26, and all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies, arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldees. So everybody else is like, oh, crap, they're going to come hit us again. They fled to Egypt. Egypt's outside of Babylon, and Egypt has held its own against Babylon. They're fleeing to Egypt to get out of here. So not an uncommon thing for them to do. In fact, we find a lot of Israelite influence in Egypt. That's the whole, the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt is Jewish texts, basically, ancient Jewish texts that predate the Savior to an extent, but it was a Jewish group that lived in southern Egypt. So verse 27, it came to pass in the 7th and 30th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, that evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, to lift up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, out of prison. So verse 27 is years down the road. So Nebuchadnezzar has died. Evil Merodach is another king that had rises up in Babylon, and he is talking to Jehoiachin. Remember, he was pulled off and not made the king. He was the one that was brought in for the king of Judah for only a couple months, for a little bit of short time, and then he was taken captive when Nebuchadnezzar came through, who made Zedekiah the king. So Jehoiachin went to jail, and he's still preserved. Verse 28, and he spake kindly to him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon, and changed his prison garments, and he did eat bread continually before him all the days of his life. And his allowance was a continual allowance given him of the king, a daily rate for every day, all the days of his life. So evil Merodach brings this man, who is a former king of Judah for a short period of time, brings him up to make him kind of a ruler in Babylon, basically gives him part of the king's court, kind of a thing, basically. Now, this is an important point, because we have to establish a line of a direct line, descendancy line, from David to Jesus. Even though most of the kings have been destroyed and gone, Jehoiachin is a direct descendant of David, and he's still alive. That is how we get this connection through. So if you ever read in Matthew, when you go through those genealogies, that is trying to help you understand this genealogy of the difference, that connection between King David and Jesus's earthly parents, showing that Jesus is a direct descendant of David, meaning Jesus has right to the throne, to be the real king of Israel, basically. It's really cool. This is how that line gets preserved. It's through Jehoiachin. Really fun. So let's jump over to not 26. There is no 26 in 2 Kings. We're jumping to the Chronicles in the next one. So it might feel like we go back in time a little bit. Just bear with us as we go through these books, because we've done most of the chronological time frame. There's still more in the book of Daniel and others. We get a little bit more chronological time frame moving forward. But most of the chronology timeline of the book of the Old Testament is done. So we're going to go back and go through some of these stories again through Chronicles. And then we're getting the teachings of the prophets that, like Isaiah and others who have already lived and died chronologically. And then we're going to go back through their teachings, and then we're going to continue on through the next couple hundred years to the end of the Old Testament. So we'll see you in the next chapter.